The wailing sound cut through the morning stillness like a knife, making Samuel Sawyer drop the fence post he had been hammering into the dry earth of his New Mexico ranch. It was September 1878, and the land stretched endlessly around him, brown and unforgiving under the relentless sun. Samuel wiped the sweat from his brow and stood perfectly still, listening. There it was again, a thin, desperate cry that did not belong to any animal he knew. His heart began to pound as he followed the sound, his boots kicking up dust as he walked toward the creek that bordered his property. What he found there would change his life forever. Wrapped in a deerskin blanket, lying in the shade of a cottonwood tree, was a baby. The infant could not have been more than a few weeks old, her face scrunched up and red from crying, her tiny fists waving in the air. Samuel looked around frantically, searching for any sign of the mother or father, but there was nothing except the endless prairie and the distant mountains. He knelt down carefully, his rough hands hesitant as he picked up the bundle. The baby quieted almost immediately, her dark eyes opening to stare up at him with an intensity that seemed impossible for someone so small. She had thick black hair and bronze skin, and Samuel knew instantly that she was native, probably from one of the Apache bands that still moved through this territory. "Where is your mama, little one?" he whispered, his voice cracking. He was only 24 years old, unmarried and living alone on this isolated ranch. He had no idea how to care for a baby, but he could not leave her here to die. Samuel searched the area for over an hour, calling out, looking for tracks, for any clue about what had happened. He found only a single set of footprints, small and light, leading to the tree and then away again, heading north toward the mountains. Whoever had left the baby had done so deliberately, placing her where she might be found, wrapping her carefully against the cool night air. The sun was climbing higher now, and the baby was beginning to fuss again. Samuel made his decision. He carried her back to his small ranch house, a simple structure with 2 rooms that he had built himself 3 years ago when he first claimed this land. Inside, he laid her on his bed and tried to figure out what to do next. The baby was hungry. That much was clear from her increasingly angry cries. Samuel had no milk, no bottle, nothing suitable for an infant. He did have a goat that he kept for milk and cheese, and he remembered hearing somewhere that goat milk could substitute for a mother's milk. He rushed to the barn, milked the goat with shaking hands, and brought the warm liquid back to the house. Getting the baby to drink proved to be another challenge entirely. He tried dipping his finger in the milk and letting her suck it off, which seemed to work after several messy attempts. She drank eagerly, and when her tiny stomach was full, she fell asleep in his arms, her breathing soft and even. Samuel looked down at her peaceful face and felt something shift in his chest. He had been alone for so long, working this land by himself, living a solitary existence punctuated only by occasional trips to the nearest town, Raton, which was 20 miles away. His parents had died of fever 5 years ago, and he had no siblings, no close family. This baby, abandoned and helpless, needed him. "I will call you Clara," he said softly. "Clara Francis. That was my mother's name." The first weeks were the hardest things Samuel had ever endured. Clara woke every few hours, day and night, needing to be fed and changed. Samuel fashioned diapers from old shirts, learned to warm the goat milk to just the right temperature, and walked endless circles around his small house, bouncing her gently when she cried. He was exhausted beyond anything he had ever known, but he refused to give up. He told no one about Clara at first. Part of him feared that someone would take her away, that the law or the army or someone else would decide he had no right to keep her. But as the weeks turned into months and Clara grew stronger and more alert, he knew he could not hide her forever. When Clara was 3 months old, Samuel finally made the trip to Rattan, carrying her in a sling he had fashioned from an old blanket. The town was small but growing, with a general store, a saloon, a church, and a scattering of houses. People stared as Samuel walked down the main street with the clearly native baby strapped to his chest. The general store owner, a weathered man named Tom Jenkins, raised his eyebrows when Samuel approached the counter. "That is quite a surprise you have got there, Sam." "Found her on my land," Samuel said evenly. "She was abandoned. I have been caring for her. You know what she is, do not you?" Tom said, his voice lower now. "She is a baby who would have died if I had left her there," Samuel replied firmly. "I need some things for her, cloth for diapers, anything you might have that could work as baby clothes." Tom studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "There might be some folks who have opinions about this." "There might be," Samuel agreed, "but she is my responsibility now." Word spread quickly through Rattan. Some people thought Samuel was crazy for taking in an Apache child during a time when tensions between settlers and the various native tribes ran high. Others admired his compassion. A few women from the church, led by a kind widow named Mrs. Henderson, came out to his ranch with supplies and advice. They taught him how to properly care for Clara, how to make simple baby food as she got older, how to recognize when she was sick versus when she was just fussy. "You are doing a good thing, Samuel," Mrs. Henderson told him, holding Clara with practiced ease. "This child did not choose her circumstances. She deserves a chance at life." Clara grew quickly. By her first birthday, she was pulling herself up on furniture, babbling in sounds that were not quite words yet, and watching everything around her with bright, intelligent eyes. Samuel celebrated the day quietly, making a small cake with the help of Mrs. Henderson's recipe and singing to Clara as she smashed her tiny hands into the frosting. The years passed in a rhythm of hard work and simple joys. Samuel expanded his ranch, adding more cattle and building a larger barn. Clara learned to walk, then to run, racing across the prairie on sturdy legs while Samuel worked. She learned to talk, calling him Papa from the moment she understood the word, and Samuel's heart swelled every time he heard it. He never lied to her about her origins. From the time she was old enough to understand, he told her the truth. "I found you when you were just a tiny baby," he would say, holding her in his lap. "Your first mama, whoever she was, she left you where I could find you. Maybe she could not care for you, or maybe something bad happened. I do not know, but I became your papa that day, and I have loved you every moment since." Clara would touch his face with her small hands and say, "I am glad you found me, Papa." She grew up learning both worlds. Samuel taught her everything he knew about ranching, about the land, about survival in the harsh New Mexico territory. She learned to ride almost before she could walk properly, sitting in front of him on his horse, and eventually graduating to her own gentle mare. She learned to rope and to shoot, to track animals and to read the weather in the clouds. But Clara also grew up aware that she was different. The people in Rattan were generally kind to her, especially as she grew older and proved herself to be a smart, capable girl. But she could see the way some people looked at her, the way conversations sometimes stopped when she entered a room. She heard the whispers about the Indian girl that Samuel Sawyer had taken in. Samuel tried to shield her from the worst of it, but he could not protect her from everything. When Clara was 8 years old, a boy in town called her a savage, and she came home with scraped knuckles from the fight that followed. Samuel cleaned her wounds gently and said, "You are not a savage, Clara. You are my daughter, and you are strong and smart and good. Do not ever let anyone make you feel less than you are." "But why did her mama leave her?" Clara asked, tears streaming down her face. "Did she not love her?" "I think she loved you very much," Samuel said carefully. I think maybe she was in trouble or scared or had no other choice. She left you somewhere safe, where you would be found. That was an act of love, Clara." As Clara grew older, she became curious about her heritage. She asked Samuel questions he could not answer, about native customs and languages, about which tribe she might belong to. Samuel did his best, buying books when he could find them, talking to the few friendly native traders who occasionally passed through Rattan. It was not enough, and they both knew it, but it was all they had. When Clara turned 13, something began to change in her. She became more serious, more withdrawn. She would stand on the edge of their property, staring out at the mountains in the distance, and Samuel could see the longing in her face. She was caught between two worlds, fully belonging to neither, and it was tearing her apart. "Do you ever wish I had left you there?" Samuel asked her one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Clara turned to him with genuine shock. "No, Papa, never. You are everything to me. But you wonder about them, your people." "Sometimes," she admitted. "I wonder who I might have been, what I might have known. But then I think about you and this life we have built, and I know I am exactly where I am supposed to be." Samuel pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder like she had done when she was small. "You are my daughter, Clara, no matter what, no matter who might come looking or what questions you might have. You are mine and I am yours." The years continued to roll by. Clara turned 15, then 16, then 17. She blossomed into a beautiful young woman, tall and strong with dark hair that fell past her shoulders and eyes that seemed to see everything. She could ride better than most men, shoot with deadly accuracy, and run the ranch almost as well as Samuel could. She also began to draw attention from the young men in town, though she showed little interest in any of them. Samuel watched with a mixture of pride and anxiety as she navigated this new territory. He had taught her everything he could, but he could not teach her how to be a woman. He missed his own mother fiercely during those years, wishing she were there to guide Clara through the things he did not understand. Clara turned 18 in the spring of 1896, and Samuel marked the occasion by giving her the deed to half the ranch. "You have worked this land as hard as I have," he told her. "It belongs to you too." She threw her arms around his neck, and he held her tight, this girl who had arrived in his life as an abandoned infant and had become the center of his entire world. He was 42 years old now, his hair shot through with gray, his body bearing the marks of nearly 2 decades of hard labor. But he regretted nothing. It was 3 months after Clara's 18th birthday when the warrior came. Samuel saw him first, riding across the open prairie on a paint horse, sitting tall and straight in the saddle. Even from a distance, Samuel could tell this was no ordinary traveler. The man moved with the kind of confidence that came from being completely at home in this landscape. And as he drew closer, Samuel could see that he was native, wearing traditional clothing decorated with intricate beadwork. Samuel reached for his rifle, not to threaten but to be prepared, and called for Clara. She emerged from the barn, wiping her hands on her trousers, and froze when she saw the approaching rider. The warrior stopped about 20 feet from the house, his dark eyes scanning the property before settling on Clara. He stared at her for a long moment, and Samuel saw something flicker across his face: recognition, grief, wonder. "I am called Stone Sky," the warrior said, his English accented but clear. "I have traveled far to find this place." Samuel stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Clara. "What do you want?" Stone Sky dismounted in one fluid movement, but he made no move to approach. He looked to be in his mid-30s, perhaps, with a strong face and long dark hair. There was a weariness in his eyes that spoke of hard miles and harder choices. 18 years ago, my wife died giving birth to our daughter, Stone Sky said, his voice rough with emotion. The birth was too much for her. She bled, and our medicine woman could not save her. I was crazed with grief. I had lost my wife, and I had this tiny baby that I did not know how to care for. Our band was being hunted by soldiers. We had no safe place, no time to stop and rest. The other women tried to help, but we had so little food, so little of anything. Samuel felt Clara move behind him, and he reached back to take her hand. She gripped his fingers tightly. I made a choice, Stone Sky continued, and now there were tears streaming down his face. I knew of a settler who lived here, far from the soldiers, far from the fighting. I had watched him from a distance. He seemed like a good man. So one night I took my daughter and I laid her near his land, in a place where I knew he would find her. And then I left, because if I stayed, I would have taken her back and she would have died. The silence stretched out, broken only by the sound of the wind moving through the grass. Samuel felt like the ground beneath him had shifted, like the world had suddenly become unsteady. That was you. He finally managed to say. Stone Sky nodded. For 18 years I have lived with what I did. For 18 years I have wondered if you found her, if she lived, if I made the right choice. I told myself I would never come looking, that I had given up my right when I left her. But I could not stay away, I had to know. Clara's hand slipped from Samuel's grip. She walked forward slowly, her eyes locked on Stone Sky's face. You are my father. I am the man who gave you life, Stone Sky said carefully. But I am not the man who raised you, who cared for you, who loved you every day. That man is behind you. Clara stopped a few feet from Stone Sky, studying him intently. Samuel could see her taking in every detail, comparing features, looking for herself in this stranger's face. Why now? Why did you come now? Because you are 18, Stone Sky said. A woman grown, old enough to make your own choices about who you are and where you belong. I came to see if you lived, to see if you were happy. And if you wanted, to tell you about your mother, about your people, about the part of you that this good man could not give you. Samuel's throat tightened. This was what he had always feared deep down. That someday Clara would discover where she came from and would want to leave, to become part of a world he could never fully understand or be part of. But Clara turned to look at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Papa. This is your choice, Clara, Samuel said, forcing the words past the lump in his throat. I will not stand in your way if you want to know him, to learn about your heritage. I have always wanted you to know where you came from. Clara looked between the two men for a long moment. Then she said, Stone Sky, you gave me life, and you made the hardest choice a parent can make to save that life. I am grateful for that. But Samuel Sawyer is my father. He is the one who fed me and held me when I cried. He is the one who taught me to ride and to be strong. He is the one who loved me even when the world told him he should not. Stone Sky bowed his head, and Samuel could see the man's shoulders shaking. That is as it should be. But, Clara continued, her voice gentler now, I do want to know about my mother, about my heritage. About who I am beyond this ranch. If you would be willing to stay for a while to teach me, I would like that. Samuel felt relief wash through him so powerfully that his knees nearly buckled. She was not leaving. She was not choosing one father over the other, but rather finding a way to honor both parts of herself. I would be honored, Stone Sky said quietly. Over the next few days, they worked out an arrangement. Stone Sky would camp on the property, teaching Clara about her Apache heritage, telling her stories of her mother and her people. In return, he would help with the ranch work, putting his considerable skills to use. It was awkward at first. Samuel and Stone Sky circled each other carefully. Two men bound together by their love for the same young woman but separated by culture and history, and 18 years of different experiences. Clara was the bridge between them, asking questions, translating not just words but meaning and intent. Stone Sky told her about her mother, a woman named Morning Rain who had been known for her kindness and her skill with healing plants. He told her about the Apache way of life, about their beliefs and their traditions. He taught her phrases in his language, showed her how to identify plants that could be used for medicine or food, demonstrated the proper way to pray to the spirits of the land. Samuel watched and listened, learning alongside Clara. He discovered that Stone Sky was a thoughtful, intelligent man who had been shaped by circumstances beyond his control. The Apache had been systematically pushed from their lands, hunted and harassed by both the army and by settlers. Stone Sky had lost not just his wife, but his parents, 2 brothers, and countless friends to disease and violence. "I do not blame you," Stone Sky said to Samuel one evening as they worked together to repair a section of fence. Clara was inside preparing dinner. "For taking this land, for being part of what drove my people away. You did not choose the times we live in any more than I did." "I think about it, though," Samuel admitted. "I think about what it cost for me to have this place. The land itself cost money, but before that, it cost blood and lives and the destruction of a way of life." Stone Sky was quiet for a moment, hammering a post into the ground with steady, practiced strikes. "The world is complicated. We do the best we can with the choices we have. You saved my daughter's life. You gave her love and a home. That matters more than anything else." As the weeks passed, something unexpected began to develop. Samuel found himself drawn to Clara in a way that confused and frightened him. Not Clara, his daughter, the girl he had raised from infancy, but Clara, the woman, strong and intelligent and beautiful, who laughed at his jokes and worked by his side and looked at him sometimes with an expression he could not quite interpret. He tried to push the feelings away. This was Clara, his daughter, his responsibility. It did not matter that she was not blood-related, that he had found her rather than fathered her. He had raised her as his daughter, and these new feelings were wrong, but the feelings would not go away. They grew stronger, especially as he watched Clara blossom under Stone Sky's teachings. She seemed more complete now, more fully herself, bridging her 2 worlds with grace and strength. And Samuel could not help but notice the way she looked at him, the way her hand would linger on his arm, the way her eyes followed him when she thought he was not paying attention. Stone Sky noticed it too. He approached Samuel one evening, his expression serious. "There is something between you and Clara." Samuel's face burned. "She is my daughter." "She is not your blood," Stone Sky said carefully. "You found her. You raised her as your daughter, and that bond is real and sacred. But she is also a woman grown now, and I see the way you look at each other when you think no one is watching." "It is wrong," Samuel said desperately. "I am 24 years older than she is. I am supposed to protect her, not have these kinds of feelings. Is she safe with you? Of course. You love her, more than anything in this world. Does she love you?" Samuel closed his eyes. "I think so, but that does not make it right," Stone Sky sighed. "In my culture, age differences matter less than character and care. What matters is that both people choose freely, that there is respect and love and partnership. But I understand that your culture sees things differently." "I would never act on these feelings," Samuel said. "I would never put her in that position." "That is your choice to make," Stone Sky said. "But perhaps you should speak to Clara. Let her tell you what she wants. She is not a child anymore, Samuel. She is a woman who has the right to choose her own path." That night, Clara came to Samuel as he sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. She settled beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched, and for a long time neither of them spoke. Finally, Clara said, "I love him, you know. Stone Sky. I am so grateful that he came, that I got to know him, that I have answers to questions I have had my whole life." Samuel nodded, not trusting his voice. "But Papa," Clara continued, and now she turned to face him, "you are the one who has my heart. You have always had my heart." Samuel's breath caught. "Clara, I know what people would say," she said quickly. "I know it is complicated because you raised me, but I am not a child anymore. I am a woman and I know my own mind, and I love you, not as a daughter loves a father, though that love is there too. I love you as a woman loves a man." "I am too old for you," Samuel said, his voice breaking. "You deserve someone your own age, someone who can give you a lifetime." "You are 42, Clara said firmly. "That is not old, and I do not want someone my own age. I want someone who knows me, truly knows me. Someone who has seen me at my worst and my best and loves me anyway. I want you." Samuel turned to her, cupping her face in his work-roughened hands. "Clara, if we do this, there is no going back. People will talk. They will say terrible things." "Let them talk," Clara said fiercely. "I have spent my whole life being different, being talked about. I am done living my life according to what other people think I should do. Stone Sky, I already talked to him. He said the choice was mine to make, and he would support whatever I decided." Samuel looked into her eyes, seeing his entire world reflected back at him. He saw the baby he had found by the creek, the toddler who had taken her first steps into his arms, the girl who had scraped her knees learning to ride, the young woman who had grown into someone extraordinary. And he saw the woman she was now, strong and certain and offering him her heart. "I love you," he whispered. "I have tried not to, but I do." "Then stop trying," Clara said. "Stop fighting what we both want." He kissed her then, gently at first, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. But Clara kissed him back with a passion that made his head spin, her arms wrapping around his neck, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "Are you sure?" he asked one more time. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life," Clara said. They took their time, courting properly despite the unusual circumstances. Samuel brought Clara wildflowers and took her on long rides across the property. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing, learning each other in this new way. Stone Sky watched with approval, occasionally offering advice but mostly staying out of their way. It was Stone Sky who suggested that they marry according to Apache tradition as well as the settler way. "Clara is of two worlds," he said. "Her marriage should honor both." So on a warm evening in late summer, as the sun set over the New Mexico prairie, Stone Sky performed a traditional Apache wedding ceremony. He spoke in his native language, the words beautiful and mysterious, and then translated for Samuel's benefit. He spoke of the joining of two lives, of partnership and respect, of the sacred bond between husband and wife. Then they rode into Raton, where the local preacher married them in the small church, with Mrs. Henderson and Tom Jenkins as witnesses. There were some raised eyebrows and some whispered comments, but there were also genuine smiles and congratulations. Clara wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Henderson had helped her make, and Samuel wore his best suit, his heart so full he thought it might burst. That night, in the privacy of their home, they consummated their marriage with tenderness and love. Samuel was gentle with Clara, mindful of her inexperience, and she responded with a passionate abandon that took his breath away. They lay tangled together afterward, Clara's head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I am home," she whispered. "Right here with you, I am home." Stone Sky stayed for another month, wanting to ensure that Clara was truly happy with her choice. He watched Samuel and Clara together, saw the way they moved around each other with easy affection, the way they talked and laughed and worked side by side. Finally, he announced that it was time for him to return to his people. "Will you come back?" Clara asked, holding his hands. "If you want me to," Stone Sky said. "You are always welcome to visit me as well. You have a place among the Apache if you ever want it." "Thank you," Clara said, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for giving me life. Thank you for making the hardest choice. Thank you for coming to find me and for giving me the gift of knowing where I came from." Stone Sky embraced her, this daughter he had saved by giving her away. "You are everything your mother and I could have hoped for, strong and brave and good. Samuel Sawyer is a lucky man." "I am the lucky one," Samuel said, stepping forward to shake Stone Sky's hand. "You trusted me with the most precious thing in your world. I will never stop being grateful for that trust." "Take care of each other," Stone Sky said. Then he mounted his horse and rode away, back toward the mountains, leaving Samuel and Clara to build their life together. The first year of their marriage was a time of adjustment and discovery. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's needs and desires. Clara proved to be an equal partner in every way, working the ranch with skill and determination, handling the finances with a sharp mind for numbers that Samuel had not expected. They faced challenges, of course. Some people in Rattan never quite accepted their relationship, muttering about the impropriety of it all. But many others came to see what Samuel and Clara had known all along, that theirs was a true partnership, built on years of love and respect and understanding. When Clara discovered she was pregnant in the spring of 1897, they were both overjoyed and terrified. Samuel fretted constantly, afraid that something would go wrong, that he would lose her the way Stone Sky had lost Morning Rain. But Clara was strong and healthy, and when the time came in late December, she delivered a healthy baby boy with the help of Mrs. Henderson and the doctor from Rattan. They named him James Samuel, and Samuel wept when he held his son for the first time, this tiny perfect person who was part of him and part of Clara, part of all the tangled, complicated love that had brought them to this moment. Stone Sky came to visit when James was 3 months old, bringing gifts of finely crafted baby clothes and a small cradle decorated with Apache symbols. He held his grandson carefully, singing to him in the Apache language, and told him stories of his grandmother Morning Rain. "She would have loved him," Stone Sky said, touching the baby's soft cheek. "She would have loved all of this." As the years passed, Samuel and Clara built a life that was richer than anything Samuel could have imagined that day he found a crying baby by his creek. They had 2 more children, a daughter they named Rose and another son they called Matthew. The ranch prospered under their joint management, growing into one of the most successful operations in the region. Clara taught their children about both sides of their heritage, telling them stories of their Apache grandmother and their settler great-grandparents. Stone Sky visited regularly, teaching the children words in his language and skills that had been passed down through generations. The children grew up understanding that they were part of 2 worlds, and that both were valuable and worthy of respect. Samuel watched his family with wonder, sometimes still unable to believe that all of this had come from a single moment of finding an abandoned baby. He was in his 50s now, his body showing the wear of decades of hard work, but he had never been happier. One evening, when James was 10 and Rose was 7 and Matthew was 4, the whole family gathered on the porch to watch the sunset. Clara sat beside Samuel, her hand in his, while the children played in the yard. Stone Sky was visiting again, and he sat on Samuel's other side, smoking his pipe and watching the children with a gentle smile. "You did good," Stone Sky said to Samuel. "You gave her a good life." She gave me a good life, Samuel corrected. I was just a lonely cowboy working a piece of land. She made it a home. She made it all mean something. Clara leaned her head on Samuel's shoulder. We gave each other a good life, she said firmly. All of us together. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red and purple, Samuel thought about the journey that had brought them here. It had not been easy. It had been complicated and sometimes painful and full of difficult choices. But looking at his wife, his children, and the man who had trusted him with the most precious gift imaginable, Samuel knew that every moment had been worth it. James came running up to the porch, Matthew toddling behind him. "Papa, tell us the story again, about how you found Mama." Samuel pulled his oldest son into his lap, and Clara scooped up Matthew while Rose climbed onto Stone Sky's knee. "Well," Samuel began, his voice warm with memory, "it was a September morning in 1878, and I heard the strangest sound." The family listened to the familiar story, the children asking questions even though they knew all the answers. And as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Samuel felt a profound sense of peace. This was his family, bound together not just by blood but by choice and love and the courage to create something new from impossible circumstances. Clara caught his eye and smiled, that same smile that had captivated him when she was a toddler, and that still made his heart skip a beat now that she was his wife. He smiled back, squeezing her hand, knowing that they had many years ahead of them still, many more sunsets to watch together, many more stories to tell. The children eventually tired and were put to bed, their voices growing softer as sleep claimed them. Stone Sky retired to the guest room they always kept ready for his visits, and Samuel and Clara stood on their porch, wrapped in each other's arms, looking out at the land they had built their life on. "Thank you," Clara said softly. "For what? For finding me. For keeping me. For loving me." Samuel kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for being found, for staying, for choosing me." They stood there for a long time, two people who had started as the most unlikely of families and had become something beautiful and strong and true. The prairie stretched out before them, vast and wild and full of promise, just as their life together had always been. And as they finally turned to go inside, to their warm home and their sleeping children and their shared bed, Samuel sent up a silent prayer of gratitude to whatever force had led him to that creek on that September morning so many years ago. Everything good in his life had flowed from that one moment, and he would spend the rest of his days making sure that Clara and their children knew just how precious they all were. The years continued to unfold gently. Stone Sky grew older but remained a vital presence in their lives, teaching the children and spending long evenings in conversation with Samuel and Clara. They had become true friends, these two men from such different worlds, bound together by their shared love for Clara and their mutual respect. Samuel and Clara's ranch became known throughout the region not just for its success, but for the unusual family that ran it. People came from miles around to buy cattle or horses, and they left talking about the cowboy who had raised an Apache baby, who had married her when she was grown, and who had built a life that honored both cultures. There were still moments of prejudice and misunderstanding. There were still people who looked at Clara and saw only her Apache heritage, who looked at their children and saw only mixed blood. But Samuel and Clara had built their family on a foundation of love and acceptance, and they taught their children to stand proud in who they were. James grew into a strong young man who had his mother's intelligence and his father's work ethic. He could ride like an Apache warrior and manage the ranch's accounts with equal skill. Rose inherited Clara's beauty and her fierce independence, and she declared at age 12 that she intended to become a doctor, much to the surprise of everyone except her parents, who had always encouraged her dreams. Young Matthew showed an early talent for music, somehow finding joy in the old guitar that had belonged to Samuel's father and creating melodies that seemed to capture the vast beauty of the New Mexico landscape. When James turned 18, he asked Samuel and Clara about his heritage, just as Clara had once asked Samuel. They sat him down and told him everything about stone sky and morning rain, about the complicated history of the land they lived on, about the choices that had been made out of love and desperation. "I am proud of where I come from," James said when they had finished. "All of it. The good and the complicated and the hard. It made me who I am." Samuel felt his eyes sting with tears. This was what he and Clara had worked for, this sense of wholeness and pride that their children carried in themselves. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Clara and Samuel took a long ride together, just the two of them, out to the place where he had found her all those years ago. The cottonwood tree was still there, bigger now, its roots digging deep into the earth beside the creek. "I think about her sometimes," Clara said, looking at the tree. "My birth mother, morning rain. I wonder if she knew somehow that leaving me here would lead to all of this." "I think she knew you would live," Samuel said. "That is what mattered to her. Everything else is just the beautiful accident of two people finding each other." Clara turned to him, her face still as beautiful to him as it had been on the day he first really saw her as a woman. "Not an accident, fate, destiny, whatever you want to call it. We were meant to find each other, Papa." She paused, then smiled. "I am sorry I still call you that sometimes." "I will always be your papa," Samuel said, pulling her close, "and your husband and your partner and your best friend. I am all of those things, all at once, and I would not have it any other way." They made love there by the creek, in the shade of the cottonwood tree, celebrating the journey that had brought them together and the love that had sustained them through everything. Afterward, they lay in the grass, watching clouds drift across the impossibly blue sky, content in a way that only comes from years of shared history and deep understanding. As they rode back to the ranch, Samuel thought about how much had changed since that September morning in 1878. He had been a young man then, alone and uncertain. Now he was past 50, his hair silver, his face lined, but he had never been more certain of anything than he was of his love for Clara and their family. The ranch came into view, and they could see their children in the yard. James was teaching Matthew how to rope, while Rose sat on the porch with a book. Stone Sky was there too, having arrived that morning for another visit. He waved when he saw them approaching, and Samuel waved back. "Home," Clara said softly, and Samuel heard all the love and contentment in that single word. "Yes," he agreed. "Home." That evening, the whole family gathered for dinner, the table full of food and laughter and the kind of easy conversation that comes from people who truly know and love each other. Stone Sky told stories of the old days, carefully edited for the younger children, while Rose talked excitedly about a medical text she had been reading. James discussed his plans for expanding the cattle operation, and Matthew played soft melodies on his guitar. Samuel sat at the head of the table, Clara on his right, and looked at the faces around him. This was his legacy, not the land or the cattle or the successful ranch. This family, this love, this blending of cultures and experiences into something entirely new and beautiful. This was what mattered. Later, after the children had gone to bed and Stone Sky had retired to his room, Samuel and Clara sat on their porch as they did most evenings. The stars were brilliant overhead, the same stars that had looked down on this land for thousands of years before they came and would continue to shine long after they were gone. "You ever regret it?" Samuel asked. "Choosing this life, choosing me?" Clara looked at him with genuine surprise. "Never, not for a single moment. Do you?" "God, no," Samuel said fervently. "Finding you was the best thing that ever happened to me. Everything good in my life comes from that day." "We were both found," Clara said wisely. "You found me by that creek, but I found you too. I found a father when I needed one, and later, I found a husband when I was ready for one. We found each other, again and again, in all the ways that mattered." Samuel pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her body against his. They had been through so much together. The uncertainty of those early days when he had no idea how to care for an infant. The challenges of raising a child who straddled two cultures. The complicated transition from father and daughter to husband and wife. The joys and fears of raising their own children. The building of a life that defied easy categorization but that worked perfectly for them. "I love you," he said, the words as true now as they had been the first time he had said them. "I love you too," Clara replied. "Always have, always will." They sat there in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other against all odds and had built something lasting and true. The prairie stretched out around them, vast and beautiful, full of the memories of everyone who had ever walked this land. And Samuel felt connected to all of it, to the history and the future, to the earth beneath his feet and the stars above his head. Stone Sky left a few days later, promising to return in the fall. He embraced Clara for a long time, whispering something to her in Apache that made her smile and nod. Then he shook Samuel's hand, his grip still strong despite his advancing years. "You kept your promise," Stone Sky said. "You gave her life and love and a place to belong. I could not have asked for more." "Thank you for trusting me," Samuel replied, "for giving me the chance to be her father." "You earned that title every day," Stone Sky said. "Not through blood, but through love and dedication. That is the truest kind of father there is." As Stone Sky rode away, Clara slipped her hand into Samuel's. They watched until he disappeared into the distance, a connection to Clara's past and a bridge between her two worlds. The seasons cycled through. James began courting a girl from town, a smart young woman named Sarah who was not intimidated by his mixed heritage or his unusual family. Rose, at 16, was already corresponding with doctors back east, trying to figure out how she could pursue her education despite the barriers that existed for women, especially Native women, in medicine. Matthew continued to grow, his music bringing joy to everyone who heard it. Samuel taught his sons everything he knew about ranching, about the land, about being good men in a complicated world. Clara taught Rose about strength and independence, about honoring all parts of yourself, about never letting anyone make you feel less than you were. Together, they taught all their children about love. Not the easy, simple kind that existed in storybooks, but the real, complicated, hard-fought love that sustained people through difficult times. The love that had brought together a lonely cowboy and an abandoned baby. The love that had transformed a father-daughter bond into a marriage that defied convention, but that was as strong as the mountains in the distance. When Samuel turned 60, the whole family threw him a party. Friends and neighbors came from miles around, filling the ranch house and spilling out into the yard. Even some of the Apache people who knew Stone Sky came, bringing gifts and good wishes. It was a celebration not just of Samuel's birthday, but of the family he had built, the bridges he had created between cultures, the love he had shown to a baby who was not his blood but who had become his entire heart. Clara gave a toast, her voice steady and clear as she addressed the crowd. 42 years ago, my birth father made the hardest choice of his life. He left me where I could be found, where I could have a chance at life. And Samuel Sawyer found me. He could have taken me to the orphanage or the church. He could have washed his hands of the responsibility, but he did not. He kept me. He loved me. He raised me to be strong and proud of all the parts of myself. And when I was grown, he gave me the greatest gift of all. He let me choose my own path, and when I chose him, he did not turn me away. She turned to Samuel, her eyes bright with tears. You have given me everything. A home, a family, a life full of love and purpose. You found me when I was lost, and you have never let me go. I love you, and I will spend the rest of my life showing you just how much. Samuel could not speak past the lump in his throat, so he just stood and pulled Clara into his arms, holding her tight while the crowd cheered and applauded. This was his life, messy and unconventional and absolutely perfect. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and new challenges. James married Sarah, and they built a house on the far corner of the ranch, starting their own family. Rose defied everyone's expectations and was accepted to a medical program in Boston, becoming one of the first Native women to pursue formal medical education. Matthew began performing his music in local venues, his songs telling stories of the West and the people who lived there. Samuel and Clara grew older together, their hair graying, their bodies slowing, but their love never diminishing. They still took rides together across the prairie. They still sat on the porch every evening watching the sunset. They still made love with passion and tenderness, their bodies knowing each other so well that words were often unnecessary. Stone Sky passed away peacefully in his sleep when Samuel was 65, and Clara wept for days for the father who had given her life, and then trusted another man to raise her. They traveled to the Apache reservation for his funeral, a ceremony that honored his long life and his courage and his love for his daughter. Clara spoke at the service, in Apache and in English, telling the assembled people about the man who had made an impossible choice and had lived with the consequences with grace and strength. He gave me away because he loved me, Clara said, and he found me again because he loved me still. He showed me that love is not just about holding on. Sometimes love is about letting go, and he let me go twice. Once when he left me to be found, and once when he accepted that Samuel was my father in all the ways that mattered. That kind of love, that kind of strength, is what I will carry with me always. Samuel held her that night as she grieved, understanding that she was mourning not just Stone Sky, but all the complicated feelings that came with having two fathers, with being caught between two worlds, with having to forge her own identity from disparate pieces. You made him proud, Samuel whispered to her. He knew you were happy, he knew you were loved. That was all he wanted. I was so lucky, Clara said through her tears. Two fathers who loved me enough to put my needs above their own. How many people get that? Not many, Samuel agreed. But you deserved it. You deserved all the love we could give you. They laid Stone Sky to rest in a traditional ceremony, and then they returned to their ranch, to the life they had built, carrying his memory with them. When Samuel turned 70, he knew his time was growing shorter. His body was failing, years of hard work taking their toll. But he faced the approaching end with peace, knowing that he had lived a full and meaningful life. He had loved deeply and been loved in return. He had raised a daughter who had become an extraordinary woman. He had built a family that would carry on long after he was gone. Clara nursed him through his final illness with tender devotion, never leaving his side for long. Their children came home, gathering around his bed, and Samuel looked at each of them with pride and love. Take care of your mother, he told James, who at 40 was the image of what Samuel had been at that age. She is the strongest person I know, but she will need you." "We will, Pa," James promised, his voice thick with emotion. "Follow your dreams," he told Rose, home from her medical practice in Boston. "Never let anyone tell you that you cannot do something because of who you are or where you came from." "You taught me that," Rose said, holding his weathered hand. "You and Mama both." "Make music," he told Matthew, who had become a well-known performer throughout the West. "Tell our stories. Help people understand that love can bridge any divide." "I will," Matthew promised. "Every song will honor what you and Mama built." When his children had stepped out of the room for a moment, Samuel turned to Clara. She looked older now, her hair silver, her face lined, but she was still the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "I found you," he whispered. "The best day of my life was when I found you." "And I found you," Clara said, tears streaming down her face. "My protector, my father, my friend, my husband, my everything. I am sorry to leave you." "Do not be sorry," Clara said fiercely. "You gave me 58 years of love. Some people never get even one. I will miss you every day for the rest of my life, but I will never regret a single moment." Samuel smiled, his eyes drifting closed. "Tell our grandchildren about me. Tell them about the day I found a baby by a creek and how that baby changed everything." "I will," Clara promised. "I will tell them how you found me and kept me and loved me. I will tell them about stone sky and morning rain and all the complicated love that made our family. I will tell them everything." Samuel squeezed her hand weakly. "I love you, Clara Frances Sawyer. From the moment I picked you up from under that cottonwood tree, my heart has been yours." "And mine has been yours," Clara said. "In this life and whatever comes after, we will find each other again." Samuel took his last breath with Clara's hand in his, surrounded by his children, in the house he had built with his own hands on the land he had worked for decades. He died peacefully, knowing that he had lived a life full of meaning and love. Clara grieved deeply but not hopelessly. She had lost the man who had shaped her entire life, but she still had her children and grandchildren. She still had the ranch and the memories and the love that would never fade. She lived for another 15 years, watching her grandchildren grow, helping James and Sarah run the ranch, corresponding regularly with Rose about her medical practice, attending Matthew's performances whenever she could. She told stories about Samuel and Stone Sky, making sure that every child in the family knew where they came from and understood the complicated, beautiful love that had created their family. When Clara finally passed away at the age of 73, she was laid to rest beside Samuel on a hill overlooking the ranch. Her children made sure that both Samuel's name and Stone Sky's name were on her headstone, honoring both men who had loved her as a father loves a daughter. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through generations. And every child who grew up there heard the story of how Samuel Sawyer found a baby by a creek one September morning in 1878, and how that single act of compassion had created a legacy of love that transcended culture and convention and time itself. Years later, when James was an old man, he stood by the creek with his own grandson, telling the story one more time. "Your great-great-grandfather found your great-great-grandmother right here," he said, pointing to the cottonwood tree, ancient now and huge. She was just a tiny baby, and he was a young man who had no idea how to care for an infant, but he kept her anyway. He loved her anyway, and that love changed everything. The boy looked up at him with wide eyes. "That is a good story, Grandpa." "It is a true story," James corrected gently. "And the most important part is this: love can take many forms. It can cross boundaries that seem impossible to cross. It can turn strangers into family. It can transform a life or many lives. Your great-great-grandfather and great-great-grandmother taught us that. They showed us that family is not just about blood. It is about choice and commitment and showing up every day to love someone with your whole heart." The boy nodded solemnly, absorbing the lesson. And James smiled, knowing that Samuel and Clara's legacy would continue for generations to come, a testament to the power of love to overcome any obstacle, to bridge any divide, to create something beautiful from the most unlikely beginnings. The story of Samuel Sawyer and Clara Frances Sawyer became legend in that part of New Mexico, told and retold until it took on an almost mythical quality. But for those who knew them, for their children and grandchildren and all the descendants who came after, it was not a myth. It was the foundation of their family, the proof that love could conquer anything if you were brave enough to embrace it. And on quiet evenings, when the wind moved through the grass and the sun set over the prairie in brilliant shades of orange and red, people said you could still feel their presence there. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and had built a love that would endure forever.